Okay. Here we go with Parshas Toldos. Parshas Toldos, of course, means children. Toldot means children. And in this Parsha, we read about the birth of Yaakov and Esav. And the Parsha discusses how, even though they had very great parents, Yitzchok, of course, was a great tzaddik. Rivka, even though her background was quite different than Yitzchok's, but she was also a very righteous woman. Nevertheless, lo and behold, they had twins, one of whom was a very great tzaddik. We all know about him, Yaakov, our forefather, the father of the 12 tribes, whereas the other took a very different path in life, and that was Esav, twin brothers, definitely not identical twins, just about the opposite of identical as possible. And he took a completely different path in life. He was a man who murdered, raped, stole, denied Hashem, and was just a general bad guy. He did excel in certain mitzvahs. Specifically, he excelled in the mitzvah of respecting his parents, especially his father, as we know, and that's why he was able to trick his father. He never wanted his father to realize that he wasn't living up to his expectations. And he would pull the wool over his eyes. But he did respect his father, and he did go to great lengths to show respect to his father. But other than that, he was a deceptive person who did many bad things. So there are conflicting reports about whether this was predestined or whether this is simply a path that he chose. We know everybody has free choice. That's a very important foundation of the Jewish religion. We don't believe that anybody is predetermined to be a tzaddik or a rasha, righteous or wicked. In fact, we believe that when a person is not yet born, when they're just conceived, an angel brings their soul in front of Hashem, or their not yet even formed body in front of Hashem, and says, what's going to be with this person? Are they going to be wise, not so wise, rich, poor, blah, 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 all the things. And Hashem answers, everything is predetermined. But the angel does not ask tzaddik v'rasha, righteous or wicked. That question is not asked. Why? Because that's not predetermined. That each person has to choose for themselves. And that's why we cannot blame our behavior on anybody. Even if a person was brought up in a difficult surrounding and they had bad examples and they had bad influences, the Jewish religion still believes that a person has the power to rise above that, and if he doesn't, he's fully liable. A kid who grows up in a crime family where killing people is considered macho, when he grows up, if he kills somebody, the Jewish court would kill him. And they wouldn't say, well, what do you expect? This is how he grew up. These are the examples he got. What do you want from the guy? Send him to rehab. We'll fix him. We'll make him better. Doesn't work that way. because we believe that a person has the power to overcome his background and reveal his inner good. Every person has inner good, even though we also have inner bad, by the way. We're not created perfect. We are all created with imperfections. We all have certain flaws in our character. That is true. But that being said, we also have the power to overcome those flaws and to smoothen them out. So despite all of this long explanation, we do find that some people are more likely to end up with certain outcomes more than others. Take, for example, Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, it says about him that when he was born, the house was filled with light. He was born with a bris milah. And the prophet had already prophesied about him. The prophet was only 6 years old at the time, and her name was Miriam, his sister. But nevertheless, she had prophesied that this baby is going to redeem the Jewish people. Now, Moshe had free choice. He could have not become a tzaddik. He could have not grown up to be the redeemer of the Jewish people, not to be the best, highest prophet ever who merited to give the Torah to the Jews. That's all true. But the fact is, he had a special power to be able to do that. And as long as he would utilize that power properly, he had a fast track towards that kind of lifestyle. So in a similar way, it would seem from the story of Yaakov and Esav that Esav was a little bit predisposed towards troublemaking behavior. And that's because the verse says, Vayisroitzatzu habonim bekirba, v'atoimer im kein lo mozeh anochi, v'atelech lidresh es Hashem. I put this in the notes. The children were struggling inside of her. And she said, if this is the case, that I'm going to have such a difficult pregnancy, well, what am I doing this for? Like, what's this all about? V'atelech lidresh es Hashem. She went to ask Hashem. In those days, you could ask Hashem things. And that was by going to the local prophet. She didn't go to her husband. Perhaps he was too enmeshed in the story. She didn't want to trouble him with his own children's problems. So she went to Shem, the son of Noah, who was still alive, and she asked him about the struggle that was going on inside of her. Rashi says, what were they struggling about? When she passed a house of learning, like the yeshiva of Shem and Aver, which must have been in that area if she was passing it, so Yaakov was struggling to get out because he wanted to join the yeshiva. But when she would pass, a house of idol worship, well, guess what? Esav wanted to go out because he wanted to join Mass or whatever else they were doing in the houses of pagan worship in those days. And that's what exactly the prophet told her. You have two nations inside of you. And they're going to separate at birth. Each one is going to strive to be stronger than the other. And in the end, the older one is going to serve the weaker one. So basically, there's a power struggle going on. And that's why you are having these unusual pregnancy pains. So it seems like Esav was already on a track to becoming a pagan murderer and rapist. However, my friends, it's not so simple. There are other sources that seem to indicate that Esav had a bright future, possibly. You know, when you get your report card back, you're looking at your kid's report card, your alarm bells have to go on when you see the word potential. Great potential. He has to unlock his potential. All the words like that are basically telling you, hey, something's wrong there. He's got potential, but his actual behavior is problematic. Nevertheless, it does seem like Esav had good potential and that things only messed up or were messed up by him later on in his life, and that it was not predetermined. And this comes from early rabbinic sources. Here we have it. Chapter 25, verse 27, towards the beginning of the Torah portion. Vayigdelu hanaorim, vayihi Esav, ish yodea tzayid ish soda, v'Yaakov ish tom, Yoshev v'holem. The lads grew up. Esav became a skilled trapper. The word for trapper is tzayid, and it can also mean a deceptive person. Esav became a deceptive person, a cheat. But in any case, he was a man of the field. Yaakov was a wholesome man living in tents. Now, what does it mean that they grew up? Rashi says, so long as they were young, they could not be distinguished by what they did, and no one paid attention to their characters. Even when he was younger, Esav was already drawn towards a field type of behavior. And Yaakov was already drawn towards a tent type of behavior, Torah study, etc. But when they were young, nobody really paid attention. And it was only after they got old when it became clear that there were differences here. Because at that time, they were already adults. Not like nowadays when a person is an adult when they're 18 or 21 or who knows what. Then it was when they were 13. One went to the house of learning, Yaakov, and the other went to the house of the idolatrous temples, Esav. So that's when their differences became clear. The Medrash expounds on this a little bit further, Bereshis Rabbah 63:10. The lads grew. That's the verse that we just said. Rabbi Levi said, this is analogous to a myrtle and a thorn bush that grew adjacent to one another. When they grew and blossomed, this one produced its fragrance, and this one produced its thorns. So when they were younger, they were still barely visible. They were on the ground. Only when they grew and blossomed, that's when one produces a myrtle, which has good fragrance, and the other one just produces thorns. So all 13 years, both of them would go to school and both of them would come from school. You couldn't really tell the difference in terms of what was going on inside. After 13 years, this one would go to the study halls and that one would go to the houses of worship. Okay, that all seems pretty innocuous. Doesn't seem to contradict anything we're saying about Esav's potential. However, we also have the following Yalkut Shimoni. Yalkut Shimoni is a commentary on, it's a medrash, I should say, on the Torah and on the Nevi'im and on the Ksuvim, on the entire Tanakh, a medrash on the entire Tanakh. Different, by the way, than Medrash Rabbah, which is a medrash that only exists on the 5 books of Moshe. Tanchuma, by the way, is also only on the 5 books of Moshe. And then there are some medrashim that are not even on all 5 books. For example, the Mechilta is on Shemos, if I'm not mistaken. The Torah's Kohanim is on Vayikra. The Sifra is on Bamidbar. The Sifri is on Devorim. Sefer HaYashar is on Bereshis. But in any case, the Yalkut Shimoni is a pretty unique medrash because it spans not just all 5 books of Moshe, but also the Nevi'im and Kesuvim. Mind you, it's not on all the Kesuvim, but it's on many of them. By the way, the Medrash Rabbah is not on most of Nevi'im and Kesuvim, but it is on the Megillas. There is a Medrash Rabbah on the 5 Megillas, which are Eicha Koheles, Esther, Shir HaShirim, and Rus. Those are the 5 Megillas. In any case, the Yalkut Shimoni says, here we go. It's in the handout. Hagodol elu Avram v'Yakov shenikru gedolim. The Medrash is quoting an earlier verse, which talks about great people. And the word Hagodol, great, is referring to Avram, Yitzchok, and Yaakov, who are called great. And the Medrash proceeds to quote a verse where Avram is called great, another one where Yitzchok is called great, and finally the verse that is relevant for this discussion. B'Yaakov ksiv vayigdelu hana'orim. Concerning Yaakov, it says, the lads became great. So we see that Yaakov is called great. Of course, the Medrash has to address the obvious question. If you're saying that that the verse that from which we know that Yaakov is great is from this verse, well, this verse includes Esav too. So the Medrash answers that as follows. The Esav hoya bechlal. Esav was included in this greatness. Ela shekilkel b'masav, but he ruined it with his own actions. Ubiza asa b'chayra, he disgraced the firstborn rights. The nasa katan, and he became small. Shenemar hine katoin nisatich, like it says, I think it's in the Haftorah of this week, behold, I have placed you as small. Talking about Esav's descendants. So here we see that Esav, at least in potential, had the ability to be great in a similar way that Yaakov had it. Now, one might argue, well, maybe that was just when he was in utero, he had that potential. Because he could have overcome that tendency to serve idols, and he could have become great. But in fact, we have a Zohar that says that even during his lifetime, he achieved greatness. Here's the Zohar. I did not quote it in the sheet because I could not find it in the source. But here's the Zohar. It's also on this week's parsha. Here's what it says. Vayigdelu ana orim, the lads became great. Sitra da Avraham gorim loin li isgadlo. The side of Avraham caused them to become great. Vizchusei sia loin, and his merit assisted them. Hu have machanach loin b'mitzvahs. He was educating them, plural, in the mitzvahs. La'asgo'o Yaakov ve'esav, to make Yaakov and Esav great. Quite an amazing Zohar. According to the Zohar, Avraham Avinu, right, our patriarch Avraham, was heavily involved in the chinuch, in the education of his grandsons. He educated them in mitzvahs, and he made them great. According to this Zohar, when it says Vayigdelu Hanaorim, the children became adults, at that time it's also referring to them becoming great, spiritually great. That was on the day of the bar mitzvah. When they had their bar mitzvah, they were spiritually great. Avram had invested a lot of time in both of them, and Esav too. And he gave a wonderful bar mitzvah speech. He read the Torah. He read the Haftorah. I'm just kidding. You know what I'm saying. He was on the level. He was a boy that Yitzchok could be proud of. Unfortunately, it seems that after Avram passed away is when he went, as they say in modern terminology, OTD. OTD stands for off the derech. Nowadays, everything is acronyms, LOL and BTW and FYI. So here we are. OTD stands for off the derech referring to the path of Torah and mitzvahs. And Esav went off of that path, but it seems like he did not go off of that path until Avram's passing. As long as Avram was alive, he managed to keep him in the straight and narrow, and not just keep him there, but bring him to a high level there. So we're back to the question, what was Esav predisposed to? Did he have great potential locked in him, spiritual potential, like we see from how Avraham influenced him? Or on the contrary, was he really predisposed to being a major troublemaker, and Avram was just kind of delaying it and managing to put a stop on it temporarily? But once Avram passed away, his true nature came out, that he was holding back all the time until then. Which one is it? This is the question. I'll take ideas before I give the answers, because it's kind of boring to hear my voice for 60 minutes straight. So let's get some comments. If you don't have any comments on what we've been saying, you can share a Jewish experience, a Torah thought, tell us what you ate for breakfast, whatever you like. Only 7 of us here, so no need to be bashful.
Can you hear me? Dr. J, can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Go right ahead. Yes, thanks for coming to my birthday the other week, by the way.
The thing that I was thinking, because I was kind of brought up with a lot of positivity and that input all the way through. So when Abraham was not around, he picked up bad habits. He had the tendency, and without that guidance, continual guidance to get him through the teenage years, he went south. He just couldn't, he didn't have the discipline on his own. And I've seen it with other kids that when I grew up. The parents let these kids, get away within those teenage years. They didn't have the discipline. They got into trouble.
Right.
And that would be my take, because my parents were on me the whole time. So I had no choice. It went all the way up, and they had some control over me, and I was able to be that extra influence. Not that I wasn't immature, but it kept me out of big trouble because of the continual care into the adulthood. That's my
Right.
take.
So you say Asa was basically had bad character, but his grandfather managed to keep him in line. His father not, maybe because he pulled the wool over his father's eyes, so his father never reprimanded him because his father thought he was
Yeah,
tzaddik. But
yeah.
Avraham maybe was looking at it from a bit of a more removed perspective. He was able to see the bigger picture, and he realized how much work had to be put into him. Okay,
Sure. Well,
I hear it.
he was the old man. The way he was the man, he's the old man. He had the children. He was more experienced. And
Right. We do have examples, by the way, of grandparents having an influence sometimes on the children even more than parents. And this is my
yeah,
own
and
observation. I don't have a source for it in Torah, but I've observed it in several cases. Take, for
yeah.
example, Esav's son, Eliphaz, was actually not a bad guy. Eliphaz, even though he was sent to kill Yaakov, he actually didn't do it. Yaakov convinced him not to. And according to some of our sages, he was the same Eliphaz who was a friend of Eov's. And he appears in the book of Eov as quite a learned and wise person, almost like a prophet.
Hmm.
On the other, so that maybe was the influence of his grandfather, Yitzchok. On the other hand, his son, none other than Amalek,
Hmm.
was a very bad guy.
Hmm.
He was like the forerunner of the anti-Semites of the world. Maybe he was influenced not by his father Eliphaz, but by his grandfather Esav. Similarly, in the um, line of Davidic kings, sometimes you have a pattern where the father is wicked and the son is righteous, and then the grandson is wicked, the great grandson is righteous. You have a pattern of that in a few cases, and I wonder to myself if maybe the father was too busy running the kingdom and kind of didn't
Hmm.
really pay attention to his kids as much as the grandfather did. And the grandfather influenced the kids in some cases more than the father.
Makes a lot of fun.
So
Absolutely. Too busy
that's just
making
a
a
little
living, too
observation.
busy running things, not paying attention to the children. I've seen it myself with a lot of. If you don't pay attention to the children, and especially in even the young years, but in the older years of mischief, then they go
That's
wild.
true.
Yeah.
That's true. They need to be directed. They have a lot of energy, and the energy has to be directed. Okay, let's have some other ideas.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll say l'chaim.
Uh,
Naomi, Mordechai, Susan, Bruce, Herschel. Who is sent? Is that the Greenbergs?
Rabbi, my
Yes.
parents felt that they didn't try to tell us what to do. They wanted us to look at the example that they showed us. In other words, we were supposed to learn by example, not by being told what to do. We had to make up our own minds and go the direction that we felt was good for us. Even though my parents kind of felt I was the black sheep because I had three younger brothers, but because I didn't follow what they thought I should follow, But in the end, my father said it was better what I had, the life that I made for myself. He realized, he realized that I wanted something different.
Nice.
And he was okay with it finally. But it took until he was like 80 years old to,
Well,
well,
at least he said it then.
To finally come to terms with my choices, which was very nice.
Nice. Well, I will say there is very much truth to that idea that you teach more by the way you behave than by the way you speak. They say it about children who come to shul with their fathers, and their fathers tell them, daven, pray, look in the siddur, don't talk. And then after they give them this whole speech about it, the fathers turn around to their neighbors and start discussing this, that, and the other. Some fathers, on the other hand, come to shul and they totally ignore their kids because they are so immersed in their davening that they're transported. They're actually not paying attention to their kids. They're busy talking to Hashem. So who's going to end up being a better davener? The one who was told to daven, but who saw his father talking? Or the one who was never told anything, but he saw his father davening? I don't have to answer that question. Okay, any other thoughts? Last call. All right, here we go.
I think that the most important thing is not only it's a combination of watching and the parent that talks, that explains, that reinforces. It's a combination that makes it powerful, and that's what I would think is the winner.
Right. It's good to have a little bit of both. It's good to have the example, and it's also good to have some communication. But of course, the communication has to be communicated in a loving way and not in a disparaging way, not in a critical way, because very often people respond negatively to criticism. So you have to know how to emphasize the positive while at the same time directing away from the negative.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here we go with the Rebbe's explanation, my friends. The Rambam says that there are two types of people. One is called the Chassid HaMe'ula, the exemplary righteous one. Chassid is actually a pious one. The exemplary pious person. And the other one is called the Koivesh Es Yitzroi, the one who overcomes their desires. The Chassid HaMe'ula, the exemplary pious one, that's a person who naturally tends towards positive things. He just enjoys intellectual pursuits. He enjoys spiritual elation. He's not so drawn to the pleasures of the flesh. They just don't interest him as much. He likes the finer aspects of life. I mean, spiritually finer aspects of life. He's just a more refined person naturally. Then you have the Koiveshes Yitzroi. The Koiveshes Yitzroi is the sort of person who has a very strong Yetzer Hara, has a very strong desire to sin, yet also has the ability to overcome that desire. Each of these has an advantage in terms of what they bring to the spiritual table, so to speak. The Chassid HaMe'ula, the exemplary pious person, is a person who can soar to great spiritual heights, because that's where he's most comfortable. That's what comes more naturally to him. But he doesn't show the ability to overcome one's tendencies and one's urges. He doesn't show the great effort that goes into serving God despite having desired to do otherwise, because he's serving God in a manner that he's naturally predisposed to. The Kovish HaSitzri, the second type, is a person who maybe he won't become the top scholar of the generation. Maybe he won't become the most celebrated prophet of all time, or whatever. But on the other hand, he will overcome the challenges that he has, and he will bring godliness into the places of those challenges. Because he is drawn towards physicality, that's where he will end up spending his life. He is a field person. He's not a tent person. Of course, he'll spend time in the tents, meaning to say, when I say tents, I mean Torah, prayer, study, all those things. But really, where he feels most at home is in the outside world, with people, wheeling and dealing, accomplishing, being in a place where there's action, and so on. And he tends naturally towards enjoying that life and not necessarily towards being a godly person, but he recognizes the importance of serving God. He overcomes the desires that are inherent in the physical life, and he lives a godly lifestyle within his world, within his comfort zone, within the area that he's that he's comfortable. It's not that he retreats from those fields. It's not that he holds back from being a field person and forces himself to stay in the base medrash. I'm going to stay in yeshiva. I'm going to stay. And every day he just, the outside is pulling him and he wishes he could be outside. No. He lives in the outside, but he brings the yeshiva to the outside. He brings an awareness of Hashem into that space. And therefore, he's able to accomplish in very many ways more than the Chassid HaMe'ula, the exemplary pious person. The exemplary pious person will never reach the places that he reaches. So he cannot bring godliness and spirituality to those places because he has no connections to them. It's the field person. It's the one who overcomes his desires. He's the one that has that ability to bring godliness to those spaces. Now, our forefathers had to give a lesson to all of their descendants. We know that Maaseh Avos Siman Labanim, the way the forefathers behaved, was a siman, was a sign for the way the children can aspire to. We get our spiritual powers from the forefathers. Our neshamas come from the forefathers. We've inherited them from Avram, Yitzchok, and Yaakov. So now Avram, Yitzchok, and Yaakov, they all seem to be on the Chassid HaMa'ula spectrum. They all seem to be like so righteous, so beautiful, so spiritual, so exalted. Okay, Avram for the first 2 years didn't believe, but he was never a gangster. He was just searching because nobody taught him about Hashem, so he had to figure it out. The sun, the moon, the stars, Hashem. That's it. Other than that, from the age of 3 and on, he was a tzaddik. Yitzchok was born a tzaddik and circumcised on the 8th day. Yaakov was born a tzaddik. All his children were tzaddikim. So where do we find the struggle of having to battle with one's inclination, with one's physical desires, to overcome those passions and serve God? Now, of course, the forefathers did battle, but their battles were external. Avram fought with the 4 kings, and Yitzchak had some issues with Avimelech. We read about it in the Parsha. Yaakov had major issues with Esav, some with Lavan, and so on and so forth, but those were all external. Where do we see an internal battle within the lives of the patriarchs? So the truth is we don't see it so much in their own lives, but we see it in their children. Because within the children of the patriarchs, we see there were these 2 styles. We had Yitzchak, on the one hand, who came from Avram, Chassid HaMa'ula. We had Yishmael. He was also the son of Avram. He wasn't exactly a Chassid. Now, he did tshuva towards the end of his life. But for much of his life, he was a para Adam. He was a wild man. We have the children of Yitzchak, Yaakov and Esav, like we just read. One was a tent person, one was a field person. And then we have Yaakov's children, the 12 tribes. Yeah, they were all tzaddikim, but they were not all perfect. Reuven sinned a little bit with with Bilhah. Not exactly clear what he did, but it wasn't perfect, whatever it was. Yehuda with Tamar had his issues. Yisachar and Zvulun, one was a more studious sort, one was a more business sort. So we have these 2 approaches. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, the thing about the potential of the field person reminds me of Hayom Yom, where one of the Rebbeim had a Chassid who was a shopkeeper. I think his name may have been Rebbe Elia, and the Rebbe told him that he envied him because he was able to engage his customers in Torah.
Yes. Yes, there is such a teaching in Chabad. I don't remember exactly where it's from, but it could be it's the Hayom Yom, like you said, that the Rebbe Marash said he was envious of him, that he was able to maintain his spirituality in the marketplace. So yes, this is the level of the Kovish Yitzchak. And this is what it was with Esav. Esav, on the one hand, had a tendency towards pagan worship. Yes, when he was a baby, he had that tendency, but that doesn't mean he was predisposed towards it. On the contrary, together with that tendency, he had the power to overcome it and to bring godliness to those spaces, not inside the houses of pagan worship, obviously. Those have to be destroyed, they can't be fixed. But to the people who might want to frequent those houses, Esav had the power to influence them. And as long as his grandfather Avram was alive, he was actually exercising that power. After Avram passed away, unfortunately, as we mentioned, that was not maintained. But he did have that power to be the Kovish Yitzchak, to be the second type. And this is something important that we have to learn. Not all our children are going to be field people. Sorry, tent people. Some of them are going to be field people, and we shouldn't try to push them into the tent if they are field people. We should let them be field people, but we should help them serve Hashem within that space and bring godliness into it. Chaim. It's been a pleasure studying with all of you today. I wish you a good Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Mhm.